All right, so our next story comes from Bleeping Computer, and the title here is CISA. Hackers still, so CISA colon, so it's not CISA hackers. Hackers still exploiting older Ivanti bugs to breach networks. So I do want to say that this is not talking about the most recent Ivanti bugs that are being used to breach networks. This is talking about vulnerabilities that were patched towards the middle of last year, 2024, are still being actively exploited, which means that they still exist in infrastructure. And some of them, by the way, were rated critical. And it is it hurts my heart that companies are getting hacked by 6-month-old critical vulnerabilities on devices that are sitting at the edge of their network.
For the love of God, just patch it.
Jesus Christ. So this one is in a CISA is talking about here is a set of vulnerabilities in the Ivanti cloud service appliances, which I think was the old LANDesk set of software, which, and by the way, good luck finding information about the Ivanti cloud service appliances on Ivanti's website, because goodness, I tried. You can find some support articles, but can't find a lot of sales material.
They're really just firing on all cylinders on this one, aren't they? They're doing great.
They certainly are. So anyway, it's an endpoint management, at least as far as I can tell. It's the old old LANDesk endpoint management tooling that is unfortunately able to deploy things like software and whatnot to your endpoints. And so it's kind of important thing to keep protected. But yes, we're seeing some number of successful compromises even today using these now 6-month-old vulnerabilities. 6-month-old. Let me say it differently. Vulnerabilities that have been patched 6 months ago. So,
yeah,
goodness, if you have it, by the way, if you have Ivanti stuff, and I will say, if you have of any stripe, you really need to make sure that you are on top of patching. I will say, broadly speaking, a lot of Ivanti stuff is the vulnerabilities have been exploited prior to there being a patch. And so if you have Ivanti and it is at the edge of your network, I strongly recommend that you perform some sort of triage to determine if you've been compromised, even if you've patched. So whether you continue to use Ivanti or not, that is not for me to decide. But this is a very problematic, historically been a very problematic set of software. Now I will say, they do point out in the article that Ivanti seems to be doubling down on improving the security of their offerings. And I think to some extent, some of the recent vulnerabilities disclosures have been a result of proactive actions taken by Ivanti. But we continue to see, and I think as late as like a week or 10 days ago, yet another round of vulnerabilities that were being exploited as 0 days. So,
Jerry, in terms of doubling down, what is the result of multiplying 0 by 2?
Fair enough.
I shouldn't be that harsh.
Damn you and your logic.
No, I shouldn't be that harsh. I'm being unintentionally cruel. Obviously, they're getting their ass kicked right now, and some of that we don't know. Could be a result of bad internal practices, could be bad luck, could be poor SDLC, could be all sorts of things. I don't know. But
yeah, I think one of the challenges with Ivanti, I don't have any like insight into the inner workings of Ivanti, but I will say
you could have ended that sentence much, much earlier.
That's a fair point. But Ivanti is a roll up of a whole bunch of different technologies. So like LANDesk, and I don't even know who else. And so a lot of this technology the vulnerabilities that they're stumbling across aren't necessarily vulnerabilities that Ivanti proper introduced. It's quite likely that they are heritage vulnerabilities, and they're being uncovered right now because Ivanti, as we've said in the past, like it's their turn, it's their time in the barrel right now. People are just kicking the crap out of Ivanti's products, and so they're finding stuff, and because a lot of this stuff comes from older legacy companies, they're being very successful in finding vulnerabilities. And I don't know when it ends. I think Ivante's going to have a long road ahead of them. They don't seem to be slowing down in terms of the arrival rate of exploited 0 days, which is concerning to me.
That's fair. I don't know if you know, but I heard from our friend Bob the other day. It's been a while. He's out of the Turkish prison, which is nice.
Well,
But he
good.
was telling me that one of the software shops he worked for that did a lot of it, they had a problem with lots of people who built the earlier code bailing after the buyout. So they lost
Mm.
all of the intellectual property and tribal knowledge and historical knowledge around that stuff. And then the acquiring company had trouble maintaining it, fixing it, keeping up to date. Often, it's kind of, but again, when you adopt a puppy, you got to take care of the puppy or it'll chew on your furniture.
Well, it's a good point. Look, I've been around for a long time, and I have seen the same thing. I've been acquired 3 times. The companies I work for been acquired 3 times, and every time I saw the same pattern. Right, the 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 people who built the product, leave. They don't mesh with the culture, because typically it's a smaller company that gets bought by a larger company, and people who, and as a small company person, I feel this deeply. Like, you don't mesh with the large company culture, and so you end up leaving for a variety of reasons, and you multiply that by a bunch, and suddenly you don't have people left who understand the product anymore. And so, and look, I don't have any particular insight into Avanti. Maybe they take awesome care of their acquired companies. I just don't know. But I do know that most all of their products that they seem to be having trouble with, had a different name on it, 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, I think it's a very common problem that we don't talk about much. I don't know is planned for much with a lot of the industry because if you think about it, so you're an acquiring company, you buy some software shop, they're much smaller, and the people there want to work at a smaller shop, most likely because they're at a smaller shop. And now they're suddenly thrust into this new culture that they may not like. And I would say the majority of people want to go back to that small, probably startup type culture. But your existing software devs at the larger company are busy doing 1,000 other things on the existing software shop. And unless you're very intentional about transferring knowledge and building and spreading that tribal knowledge from the people you just bought to the people who are hopefully going to stay, which rarely happens, rarely do you have time for it, you have this rinse repeat problem of the people who built the code leaving and nobody's done knowledge transfer. And I've seen that a few times in my career. You've seen it a bunch in your career. I don't know if it's just an oversight of tech M&A or just we've been unlucky. I'm sure there's some companies that do it well, but it feels like we see more companies that don't.
I think there's a lot of reasons for it. Certainly when a company buys another company, or they buy a product, they do it because they feel like there's synergies to be had. Like, they feel like they can make more money off of it. They feel like
Mm-hmm.
they can. And now, I don't, again, I don't know a lot about Ivanti, but I know that companies like Ivanti often will buy kind of the legacy things that have run their course, products that have run their course, and their approach is just to milk it until it finally, its last customer moves off onto something else. I don't have any idea if that's what Ivante's business strategy is or not, but I know that there are a bunch out there. We've seen others, like, was it Progress, and some other
Mm-hmm.
companies seem to have that kind of a business model. And when you have that, like, you're not incentivized because it's not a strategic product. You're like, the reason you bought it was not because you're going to go invest lots of development resources in it. It's because you're intending to ride it for all it's worth until the last customer leaves. But
But
again,
here's the flip side. If you don't take care of that puppy, you run this reputational risk of your name, your overall company name being dragged through the mud over and over again due to this sort of thing.
and I think that's where Avante is, to be very candid. So, they've, like I said, I think they've got their work cut out for them. I really think that patience is going to be running thin, from a regulatory perspective, from a customer perspective. Like, I don't know how I would be comfortable, given, the history now. maybe like behind closed doors, there's Ivanti has a really reasonable story that they tell to their customers. I don't know, but I would be concerned. That's where I'll leave it.
That's fair.
All right. So the next, in it. So by the way, they do have a some indicators of compromise that you can search for, but again,
Step one is IOC number one is the name Ivanti.
I'll just go back to making sure that you are aware of where all your Ivanti wares are, that you know whether or not they've been patched. And I would, I frankly, anytime you see a new critical or high severity vulnerability come out in the recent past, most of them have been exploited as 0 days, been exploited before a patch was even available. I would definitely take steps to try to investigate whether or not your device has been breached, and be on the lookout for specific guidance related to that set of vulnerabilities that you're currently dealing with, because there may be some things that you need to do, like completely reset the appliance or what have you. So I gosh, I'm glad I'm glad I'm not in this business right now.
Good luck.
Godspeed.